Chapter 5. My grandmother was working every day, and I was coming home, doing my usual duties that no 8-year-old should have to do. Mother was safe within the compounds of the asylum, and life was moving on, or so we thought. Early one morning, Granny got a call. "Mrs. Brown, your daughter Red has escaped from the institution. The nurse went in to administer her medication, and she was gone. We have looked everywhere. We want to extend our apology and let you know we are doing everything we can to find her. If she shows up at your house, we would appreciate it if you would call us immediately." A panic went through the house like wildfire. "John, Brad has escaped from the hospital. They just called, and they have looked everywhere for her. Can you take me around the places you think she may have gone?" My father, who had not long been released from the hospital, got his car keys, and he and Granny went looking for her. No one informed me that this was taking place. I just overheard it like everything else I knew. I just heard it. My father and Granny looked for her for about 3 to 4 hours and returned home empty-handed. The police had already been notified, so looking for Mother became a waiting game. It seemed like days before we would find her. Then she finally showed up at my uncle's house and was returned to the hospital. She never told us where she was for 3 days. She just appeared as quickly as she disappeared. I didn't care where she was. I was just glad that they had found her. I remember feeling really sad and lonely. I had no one to talk to. I was the oldest, and both of my little brothers depended on me. I couldn't tell them everything that was happening. They were too young. It's a bad thing when you have no one to turn to. I lived in a house with my grandparents and my uncle, who was practically grown and had a life of his own. Who was I to turn to? Who was I to lean on? All these things happening, how much could I take? I prayed every day, and I would imagine that I was somewhere else, that I was someone else. Why was God doing this to me, I would ask? And why did he do this now? I was a child who should have been playing outside in the yard, making friends, or hanging out with all the other kids. Yet I was in darkness, hiding from the rest of society so no one would know about Mother. God forbid a friend would see her in her condition. I would be the laughing stock of every crazy joke. Every evil prank and every poking moment would be directed at me. When I went to school, I didn't talk to anyone. I was afraid they would know, as if they could read my thoughts. I didn't want a friend. I was afraid that they would ridicule Mother and tell my secret. Kids are evil, and they have ways of making you feel bad about yourself. On top of that, the neighbors' kids would chase my brother and I home from school every day. There were 5 of them, and we had come to fear them like nobody's business. My life was a total mess, so I was always imagining myself someplace else. I would close my eyes tight and squeeze them as if I would never open them again. Then I would think about a place, any place that had flowers, where the wind was blowing hard and wild, and I would imagine myself being blown around, picked up, and tossed to and fro. This was how I dealt with my horrible surroundings, my reality, and my life. I visited Mom in the hospital as often as possible. She would come home as often as she could. Many times she was home for a short period of time, always having to be taken back by force. She wouldn't take her medicine for some made up reason or another, and the police would be called. It would take several police officers and a set of handcuffs to get her in the police car. She had the strength of Hercules and the might of Thor. She was stronger than any person I knew. I saw her holding on to the back of a couch and having to have 2 or 3 men get her off. Those days were like bloody Sundays. The neighbors would be gawking, and people came from other streets to see why police lights were flashing at our house. Our address became famous. The police practically knew why they were called, and they knew my mother by name. I started to wonder if my mother would ever get better. Questions came to my mind about her being this way forever. Would she ever lead a normal life? Was she ever going to be my mom again? Questions at the time that seemed as though would never be answered. Time went on with Mother not really getting much better. She finally started showing improvements, and by this time, a couple of forgotten birthdays had passed, and I had reached the ripe old age of 10. They had given her several different medical cocktails and had found the mixture that would stabilize her. She came home, and she was home for at least a year before any episodes would happen. She got herself a boyfriend, and I thought finally she was all right. She introduced me to my biological dad, and things were going great. I had 3 new little brothers and a stepmother that was wonderful and easy to talk to. I finally had an outlet to the madness in my life. I had an escape place. Mother got a divorce from my stepdad, John, and moved forward with what appeared to be a normal life.